When you're a father long enough, you learn to live with silence. Not the comforting kind, the silence of a house at rest, or a child finally asleep. No, I'm talking about the kind that arrives when people you love say something you can't forget, and then go on about their day as if it was nothing. That silence came to me one Saturday afternoon. We were sitting around my son's kitchen table, the one I helped him pick out when he and his wife first got married. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. They had just finished showing me the glossy brochure of the home they wanted to buy, a sprawling two-story place in a newer subdivision. Stainless steel everything, open floor plan. A forever home, they called it. I nodded, quietly happy for them. Then came the pause, and then came the words. "Dad will need a co-signer on the mortgage." But my son hesitated, and in that hesitation I felt something shift. His wife filled the silence. "Your father doesn't really have the kind of credit we'd need," she said, her voice dipped in honey but edged like glass. "It's just safer this way. Safer, not good enough, not reliable, too small for the life they wanted to build." I smiled, or at least I tried to, because what else do fathers do in those moments? We pretend the cut doesn't hurt. We nod, sip the coffee that suddenly tastes bitter, and tell them we understand. But I carried her words with me, heavier than any mortgage payment I'd ever made. And in that silence, the one that followed their polite rejection, I made a promise to myself. If my son's new family thought I wasn't good enough to co-sign, maybe it was time to remind them of the truth. I had already signed my life away 100 times over for him. They didn't need my name on their line of credit. What they didn't know was that, soon enough, my name would be on the deed. That night I drove home slower than usual, headlights dragging across the quiet suburban streets like a tired man pulling his shadow. I passed houses with porch lights glowing, curtains drawn tight against the December cold. Families sat inside, eating dinners at tables, arguing about chores, laughing at jokes. And I thought about how strange it was that a father could give decades of his life to raising a boy, only to sit in that boy's kitchen one day and hear that his sacrifices weren't enough to buy a seat at the table. The steering wheel felt heavy in my hands. My son's words, his wife's sharper ones, played back in my head like an old cassette tape on repeat. "He doesn't really have the kind of credit we'd need. You would think after all these years of sweating through late nights and double shifts, paying off debts nobody else even knew about, I'd have grown numb to the sound of judgment. But there are wounds only children can give you. They cut where no one else can reach." When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked smaller than it ever had. The paint needed a fresh coat, the gutters sagged in one corner, the porch light flickered like a tired star. Yet to me, every flaw was part of a story. Every imperfection was a reminder of a bill I had chosen to pay for my son instead of for myself. The siding that never got replaced because I was helping him buy his first car. The roof that should have been patched last spring, but the money went to their down payment fund. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and the kind of loneliness you can't vacuum away. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one my wife and I bought 30 years ago, scarred with burn marks from hot pans and scribbles from a boy's math homework, and I opened the drawer where I kept my important papers. Bank statements, retirement accounts, insurance policies. Years of numbers, like tally marks on the wall of a prison cell. I spread them out across the table until it looked like a battlefield. And maybe, in some way, it was. My savings were not impressive by Wall Street standards. But to me, every dollar represented a missed vacation, a pair of shoes I never bought, a night I worked instead of sleeping. I'd meant it all for him, for his security, his future, his family. The irony that his wife questioned whether I was good enough to co-sign was not lost on me. I had already co-signed his life 100 times over. It was then, in that empty kitchen with the hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence, that I made my decision. I would buy the house, not co-sign, not stand in the shadows of their ambitions. I would walk into that bank and put my name where it belonged, on the deed. Not because I wanted to humiliate them. Not because I wanted control, but because I was tired of being seen as less than what I was. A man may grow old, his hands may grow stiff, his credit score may sag under the weight of the years, but that does not erase the blood and sweat that built his family. And if my son's new in-laws thought they held the high ground, if they believed I was too small to matter, Then they had forgotten one simple truth: fathers build foundations, and this house would sit on mine. I hardly slept that night. My mind played through the logistics. I'd need to liquidate a portion of my retirement, dip into the emergency fund I protected like a dragon hoarding gold. I'd have to swallow my pride and take a personal loan, the kind of debt no man my age should willingly carry. But I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking about him, about the boy who once ran to me after striking out in Little League, about the teenager who cried in the driver's seat after failing his road test, about the young man who asked me to stand beside him at his wedding. That boy was still in there somewhere. He was buried under the weight of his wife's family expectations, drowned out by voices that measured worth in credit reports and pedigree. And maybe he didn't have the strength yet to defend me, but I wasn't about to stop defending him. The next morning I put on my only suit, the navy one I had worn to my wife's funeral, pressed and still smelling faintly of mothballs, and I drove downtown to the bank. The loan officer was younger than my son, his hair perfectly parted, his smile professional but shallow. He glanced at my paperwork, my request, and raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice even, "are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment. The word stung, but I smiled anyway. "It's not someone else's," I replied. "It's my family's." He tapped his pen against the desk, hesitated, then shrugged. Paperwork slid across the polished wood, signatures were scrawled in shaky hands, and within hours it was done. The house was mine, or rather it was his. I didn't tell him right away. Let them believe what they wanted, that the in-laws had arranged financing, that their hard work alone had secured the home. I let the charade continue because sometimes love means waiting for the right moment to tell the truth. But I wasn't finished. As I folded the deed into a manila folder, another thought bloomed in my mind, one that made my chest feel lighter than it had in years. I would not simply buy them a house. I would tie it to something greater, something that would outlive me. My granddaughter was only 3 years old, her hair dark as her grandmother's had been, her laughter a song that could cure any wound. One day she would grow, and she would need more than 4 walls and a roof. She would need a chance at education, at independence, at dignity. So, in the fine print of the transfer agreement, I added a clause, simple but unbreakable. The property would pass fully into their names only if they created and maintained a scholarship fund in their daughter's name. A fund that would grow year after year, helping other children like her chase futures their parents couldn't afford. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't control. It was legacy. Because if a father gives his son a house, he only shelters one family. But if he teaches him to give, to pass that shelter forward, he builds something that stands longer than brick or mortar. I drove home with the papers tucked safely in my briefcase. Outside, the winter sun sank lower, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds. My phone buzzed with a message from my son. "We got approved. Can't wait to show you the place at the housewarming." I smiled. Let them celebrate. Let them believe the story they had written for themselves. Soon enough, they would learn the truth. And when that day came, when the glasses clinked and the laughter swelled and the in-laws boasted about their role in the purchase, I would stand up, clear my throat, and open that folder. Not to shame, not to gloat, but to remind them that the foundation beneath those shiny floors, beneath that open-concept kitchen, beneath every dream they had built, was laid by a man they thought wasn't good enough to co-sign. And the ink on that deed spelled it out letter by letter. My name. The day of the housewarming arrived with the kind of crisp spring sunlight that makes everything look better than it really is. The streets shimmered with new driveways and freshly planted lawns, an entire neighborhood built on the idea of starting over. Young families unloading boxes, retirees walking their dogs, mailboxes that had never known junk mail until now. It was the sort of development that promised you could leave your past behind at the sales office and walk into your future with a granite countertop and a fixed-rate mortgage. My son's new home stood near the cul-de-sac, larger than I expected, with clean lines and stone accents, the kind of place designed to impress the neighbors. Balloons were tied to the porch railing, swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Laughter spilled out of the open windows, the sound of glasses clinking and plates being passed around. I parked 2 houses down. It wasn't intentional, there simply wasn't space closer. But the walk did me good. It gave me time to breathe, to rehearse in my mind the words I might say if the moment came. The manila folder was tucked under my arm, its edges worn soft from the nights I had pulled it out, reread every line and put it back again. Inside, the house smelled of new paint and catered food. The living room was crowded with relatives from my daughter-in-law's side, people in polished shoes and tailored dresses, laughing with the easy confidence of those who never worried about the next bill. Her parents were in the center, directing conversation like maestros. My son moved between them, smiling nervously as if trying to keep all the plates spinning. "Dad," he called when he saw me. He hurried over, kissed my cheek, clapped my back. His hug was quick, distracted. His wife followed, lips painted, smile perfect. "So glad you could come," she said, as though it were a favor I was doing her, not the other way around. The kitchen island was covered in food, shrimp cocktail, artisan breads, tiny sandwiches held together with toothpicks. I recognized none of it. Somewhere in the back of my mind I heard my late wife's laugh, imagined her whispering, "What's wrong with a pot roast and mashed potatoes?" Her absence pressed against me in moments like this. She would have known what to say, how to smooth the tension. Without her, I had only silence and the papers in my folder. The speeches began an hour later. Her father tapped his glass, clearing his throat. "We're so proud of Michael and Isabella," he said, his voice booming. "They've worked so hard to make this dream a reality, a home of their own, a foundation for the future." Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. My son looked down, embarrassed but pleased. His wife glowed in the approval of her family. And me? I stood in the back, my hands folded in front of me, feeling the weight of the deed pressing through the folder into my palm. I remembered the night my son was born. I had stood outside the hospital nursery window, watching the nurse place him in a row of bassinets. All the babies looked alike, but I knew which one was mine. And I promised him then, before he could even open his eyes, that I would never let him go through life unprotected. Now I watched him smile at a family that measured worth in credit scores and connections. I watched him accept praise for building a future I had purchased, and I wondered if he remembered the promises I had made him before he could even speak. Someone clinked a glass again. It was her mother this time, her pearls catching the light. "Of course," she said, "we couldn't let them take this step alone. It takes family to build something like this. Real family, real family." The words landed like stones in my chest. My son glanced at me then, just for a second. His eyes flickered, guilty, uncertain. He knew what those words meant. He knew who they excluded. I set my drink down. My hand tightened around the folder. It would have been easier to stay quiet, to let the night pass in polite conversation and shallow laughter, to slip away before dessert and drive home to my quiet house, where no one asked me for speeches or questioned whether I belonged. But love isn't always polite. Sometimes love is a truth dropped like a stone in still water, sending ripples that can't be ignored. I stepped forward. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a sound louder than the clinking glasses. Heads turned, conversation stopped. My son's eyes widened, his wife's lips pressed thin. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady though my heart thundered. "I'd like a moment." Silence fell over the room. Her father looked annoyed, as though I'd interrupted a board meeting. Her mother raised her eyebrows. I held up the folder. "I've listened tonight to words about hard work and family," I continued, "about building a foundation, and I think there's something you all deserve to know." My son took a step toward me, whispering, "Dad, please," but I shook my head. "This house," I said, placing the folder on the island beside the shrimp cocktail, "does not stand on the foundation you've been told. It stands on mine." I opened the folder. The deed slid out, the ink sharp and undeniable, my name clear as day. Gasps rippled through the room. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father leaned forward, squinting. My son stared, frozen. "I bought this house," I said simply. "Not because I wanted control, not because I wanted recognition, but because when a man builds his family, he doesn't stop just because the world thinks he's too old or not good enough." I could feel the room tilt, the weight of what I'd revealed pressing down, but I wasn't finished. "There is a condition," I said, sliding another paper forward. "This deed will transfer fully into their names only if they maintain a scholarship fund for their daughter, a fund that will give other children the chance to learn, to grow, to build futures of their own." Her father's face turned red. "This is outrageous," he snapped. Her mother shook her head. "You can't just—" "I can," I said quietly, "because I already did." I looked at my son then. His face was pale, his eyes wet. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. The silence that followed was not the empty kind, not the cutting kind. It was the silence that comes when truth fills a room so completely there's no space left for anything else. And in that silence, I felt the weight I had carried for years begin to lift. For a long breath, no one spoke. The paper with my name on it lay across the counter like a dropped weapon, sharp and undeniable. The lights above the island hummed faintly, and somewhere in the back of the house a child laughed, oblivious to the storm that had gathered in the room. Then Isabella's father cleared his throat, the sound clipped and angry. "This is highly inappropriate," he said, his voice vibrating with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "You cannot just walk into a celebration and undermine your own son's accomplishments with this stunt." "Stunt," I repeated softly, though the word stung. "You think signing away my retirement, emptying savings I'll never rebuild, and putting my name on the line is a stunt. You think buying a roof over your daughter's head is a magic trick." Her mother, lips tight, leaned toward her friends at the table as if rallying an army. "This is precisely why we didn't want him involved. Always dramatic, always playing the martyr." I could have shouted then. I could have laid out every receipt, every bill, every sacrifice scrawled in the fine print of my life, but I didn't need to. I had the deed, and the truth of it spoke louder than any anger I could muster. My son finally found his voice. "Dad," he said, quiet, uncertain, why didn't you tell me?" I turned to him, the boy I had once taught to ride a bike, who now stood before me with shoulders broad but spirit shrinking under the weight of two families. "Because," I said gently, "I wanted you to feel like this house was yours. I didn't want to humiliate you. But when I gestured toward the in-laws, stand here tonight and talk about who really built this foundation, I can't stay silent. Not anymore." A murmur ran through the room. Some of Isabella's relatives avoided my eyes, staring down at their glasses of wine. A few of my son's old friends looked at me with something like respect, though they stayed quiet, not brave enough to enter the fight. Isabella stepped forward then, her heels clicking against the hardwood like the drumbeat of a charge. Her cheeks were flushed, her hands trembling though she tried to steady them on the countertop. "This is manipulative," she spat. "You've embarrassed Michael in front of everyone. You've embarrassed me. Do you know how this looks? As if we couldn't stand on our own, as if we needed charity." I looked at her, this woman my son had chosen, and wondered what version of me she had ever seen. Did she know the man who worked 2 jobs so her husband could finish college? Did she know the man who fixed their plumbing last winter at midnight because they couldn't afford a plumber? Or did she only see the man her parents described, an old laborer, rough around the edges, good for handouts but not good enough to share a table? "This isn't charity," I said firmly. "It's blood. It's decades of sweat poured into something more lasting than a paycheck. And if that embarrasses you, maybe you should ask yourself why." Her face hardened, but it was my son's voice that cut through. "Isabella," he said, hoarse, "please." She turned on him, startled. "Please what?" He swallowed, eyes darting between us. "Please don't talk to him like that." The room shifted then, subtly, like the tilt of the earth before an earthquake. For the first time he wasn't shielding her from me. He was shielding me from her. Her father scoffed. "Michael, don't be naive. This is a power play. He's holding this house over your head, binding you with conditions. A scholarship fund, that's absurd." I opened the second page of the agreement, the one with the clause spelled out in clear black letters. "It's not absurd. It's responsibility. A house is more than walls and windows. It's legacy. And if you're going to live under a roof I built, then you'll learn to build something for someone else too." Her father jabbed a finger toward me. "You can't dictate terms in our family." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he and those nearest could hear. "Then maybe you should have been the one to buy the house. But you didn't." "I did." A hush fell again, heavier this time. My son's shoulders slumped as though he carried the weight of both worlds pressing into him. The proud but overbearing in-laws on one side, the stubborn, weathered father on the other. His hands gripped the counter, knuckles white. "Dad," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." I saw it in his face then, the shame, the confusion, the boy who wanted to please everyone and ended up pleasing no one. And for the first time in years, I saw something else too, a crack in the wall Isabella's family had built around him. I softened. "I know you didn't," I said. "This isn't about punishing you, this is about protecting you, protecting your daughter, protecting the name I've spent my whole life giving you." Isabella's mother scoffed. "What name do you think anyone here cares about?" But she didn't finish because her own sister shot her a look sharp enough to silence. Around the table I could see it, the shift. Not everyone bought into their narrative anymore. Some of them looked at me with something new, something reluctant but real, respect. My son reached out then, fingers brushing the deed as though it burned to touch. His lips trembled. "We'll do it," he whispered. Isabella spun toward him, aghast. "Michael, you can't be serious." "We'll do it," he said louder this time, his voice steadying. "The scholarship, the condition, whatever it takes." She stared at him, betrayed, but he held her gaze. For once he didn't look away, and I felt it, the moment breaking, the tide turning. I picked up my glass, lifted it slowly. "Then let's drink," I said, my voice carrying through the stunned room. "Not to me, not to money, to legacy. To a little girl upstairs who deserves to grow in a world where love means building something that lasts." There was hesitation, then the clink of glass against glass. Not everyone joined, but enough did. Enough for my son's eyes to glisten with something I hadn't seen in years, pride. In that moment I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their approval. I had the only thing I came for, the truth laid bare, my name where it belonged, and my son standing a little taller beside it. And though the room would never be the same again, neither would he. When the last glass touched another and the chorus of half-hearted cheers scattered into the corners of the room, I knew it was time to leave. I didn't want dessert. I didn't want another smile that didn't reach the eyes. I had dropped the stone into the pond and the ripples were still spreading. There was nothing more for me to say. I found my coat on the rack by the door, the same rack I'd once seen in a glossy catalog spread out on their counter. I remembered Isabella insisting they needed it because real hardwood showed guests you had taste. My hand slipped into the sleeves like a man slipping back into his own skin after a long evening pretending to wear another. Michael appeared beside me. His face was pale, as if the weight of the entire night had pressed down on his chest and left him gasping for air. "Dad," he said, softly enough so no one else could hear, "I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know how to look at you right now." I laid a hand on his shoulder. "Don't thank me, just think about what comes next. Think about that little girl upstairs and what kind of name she'll inherit." His eyes shone, but Isabella's voice cut across before he could answer. "Michael, the guests are leaving. We should be saying goodbye." Her tone was sharp, clipped, the way a teacher speaks when scolding a child who's forgotten his place. He froze between us, his body tilting toward her voice the way it always had. Old habits are hard to break, especially when they've been trained into you. I didn't blame him. I just nodded, opened the door, and stepped into the cool night. The air outside felt cleaner than anything inside that house ever could. I breathed it deep, letting it rinse the bitterness off my tongue. The street was quiet, lined with SUVs and manicured lawns, each driveway holding its own little kingdom of secrets. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small among them. My name was on one of those deeds, whether they liked it or not. I walked to my truck, folder still tucked under my arm, and slid behind the wheel. The engine rumbled to life, steady and familiar. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I didn't need to read Isabella's words to know what they would be: manipulative, dramatic, inappropriate. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the wide front window, I saw them, Isabella's parents standing in the center of the living room, heads bent together in conversation, their faces pinched tight. Isabella hovered near them, one hand flying through the air in furious gestures. My son stood off to the side, hands shoved deep into his pockets, staring at the floor. I knew that look. It was the same one he wore as a boy when he realized he'd broken something precious and couldn't figure out how to fix it. By the time I reached my own street, the adrenaline had ebbed, leaving behind the ache that comes after a fight you didn't want but couldn't walk away from. My house greeted me in silence, its porch light flickering again. Inside, the rooms were cold, the furniture arranged just as it had been when Maria was alive, though she'd been gone 8 years now. I hung my coat, set the folder on the counter, and sat down at the kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the stillness. I poured myself a glass of water, though what I really wanted was whiskey. I stared at the wood grain on the table, tracing the familiar scratches and burn marks with my fingers. How many nights had I sat here, paying their bills, shifting money from one account to another, convincing myself it was temporary, that things would change. The truth was, tonight hadn't been just about a house. It was about drawing a line in the sand after years of letting the tide wash me backward. And yet, sitting there alone, I wondered what line I had crossed for my son. Would he see this as a gift or as a chain? Would he understand what I'd done for him, or would he only hear the voices of the people already planning how to spin the story against me? I didn't have to wonder long. An hour later, the phone rang again. This time I answered. Dennis. It was Isabella's father, his voice low and seething as if the words themselves could cut me. You made a fool of yourself tonight. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes. Funny, I said, I thought I made the truth plain. You embarrassed my daughter, you undermined your son, and you humiliated this family in front of people who matter. People who matter, always the same refrain. Titles, money, connections. They thought those things made a family strong. They'd never understood that strength comes from something deeper, the kind of sacrifice that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. What you call humiliation, I said slowly, I call setting the record straight. And what you call people who matter, I call strangers who will forget you as soon as the dessert tray is cleared. There was silence on the other end, sharp and dangerous. Then he spoke again. This isn't over. You think you've won something here, but you've only made enemies. And enemies, Mr. Carter, have long memories. The line clicked dead. I sat there with the dial tone buzzing in my ear, staring at the dark window above the sink. My reflection looked back at me, older than I remembered, lined and weary. For a flicker of a moment, doubt pricked me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had only made things harder for my son. But then I thought of my granddaughter, her laugh echoing in the upstairs hallway of that too-perfect house. And I knew I couldn't regret it. Some truths cost more than others, but they are still worth the price. I turned off the phone, poured that whiskey after all, and sat in the quiet. The night stretched on around me, heavy and uncertain, but for the first time in years I didn't feel invisible. I felt the weight of my own choices, and strangely it steadied me. Somewhere across town, I knew Isabella and her parents were already plotting their next move. They would spin stories, twist truths, maybe even try to paint me as unstable or vindictive. That was their way. But I also knew something else. For the first time in his life, my son had looked his father in the eye and defended him. Not loudly, not boldly, but enough to matter. Enough to make me believe this fight was only beginning, and maybe, just maybe, I wasn't fighting it alone anymore. By morning, Spokane was already humming with the story. Not the story I had told, not the one written plainly on the deed in my folder, but the version Isabella's parents preferred. The dramatic old man who couldn't bear to let go, who staged a performance to steal his son's moment. I didn't hear it first from them. I heard it from the cashier at the grocery store. She smiled a little too politely as she bagged my bread and milk. Heard you had quite a night, she said, like someone mentioning the weather. Behind her, another clerk whispered to a coworker, their eyes flicking toward me. By the time I reached my truck, my phone was buzzing with texts from old friends. What happened at Michael's party? Heard you made a scene. Everything okay? A scene, that's what they were calling it. Not truth, not sacrifice. A scene. Across town, in their newer, brighter neighborhood, Isabella's parents were already hosting what looked like a brunch but felt like a war council. Their friends filled the kitchen, sipping mimosas, leaning in close as Catherine recounted the night's events with a flair that belonged on a stage. Dennis barged in, waving papers, she said, her hand slicing the air. Can you imagine? At his own son's housewarming. He made it sound as though Michael couldn't have done a thing without him. It was mortifying. Mortifying. That word would travel faster than the truth ever could. It would cling to me in conversations I wasn't invited into, at country clubs I'd never stepped foot in. Isabella added her own shading to the story. It wasn't just embarrassing, she said, voice trembling just enough to seem fragile. It was cruel. He humiliated us in front of everyone we know. He's trying to control us even now. Her father nodded gravely, sealing the narrative like a judge handing down a sentence. The man is unstable. I worry for Michael, for the little one. Families like ours, we build legacies, yes, but not by chaining our children to the past. Dennis can't see that. And so the story spread, through whispers at the cafe, nods across pews at church, side conversations in boardrooms and beauty salons. I had become a character in their play, the bitter father, the jealous patriarch, too small to step aside with dignity. Meanwhile, Michael walked through the day like a man carrying invisible weights. At work, colleagues asked careful questions, their eyes wide with curiosity. "So, heard your dad made quite the announcement." Some laughed like it was a joke, others tilted their heads with sympathy. Michael forced smiles, muttered answers, avoided the truth. At lunch, his phone buzzed with texts from high school friends who had been at the party. "Man, your dad is a legend. I wish mine had done that for me." But alongside those messages came others harsher. "Dude, can't believe he stole your spotlight." "That's toxic, man, boundaries." Two worlds pulling at him, two narratives colliding. He could feel the tug-of-war tightening in his chest, tearing at old scars. That evening he came home to find Isabella pacing in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, of course we'll meet with him," she was saying, voice sharp but sweetened at the edges. "We can't let this go on. We have to protect our family." She hung up and turned to him with eyes that glowed like polished stone. "An attorney, tomorrow." Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "Do we really need lawyers?" She dropped her phone onto the counter with a clatter. "Do you want to live under his thumb forever? Because that's what will happen if we don't fight this. He'll show up whenever he pleases, remind everyone who really owns this house, who really runs our lives. You think this stops with one scholarship clause? It won't. He'll always find a way to insert himself." Michael didn't answer right away. He went upstairs, checked on his daughter, tucked the blanket around her tiny body. She stirred and whispered "Daddy" in her sleep, and something in his chest cracked. When he came back down, Isabella was still waiting, arms crossed. "Well." He sat at the table, staring at his hands. "He's not trying to control us," he said quietly. "He's trying to make sure she has a future, that we all do." Her face hardened. "That's what he told you, but people don't do things like this without strings attached. You think this was for her?" "No, Michael, this was for him, to feel important, to be the hero." He looked up at her then, really looked, and saw not just his wife but the reflection of her parents' voices stitched into her own. Control, humiliation, manipulation. Words that had filled their living room the night before, now spilling into his marriage like poison. But still, he couldn't bring himself to fight her. Not yet. So he sat there in silence, the weight of two stories pressing down on him, the one told by the papers in my folder and the one spreading like wildfire through the city. That night, as Spokane settled under a blanket of quiet, I sat at my kitchen table again. The phone buzzed with another message, this time from Rosa, my late wife's sister. "Heard some things. Just wanted to check on you." I typed back slowly. "I'm fine. Don't believe everything you hear." But as I set the phone down, I knew the truth. It didn't matter whether I was fine. What mattered was whether my son could withstand the storm his in-laws had unleashed. Because once people start whispering, it takes more than truth to silence them. It takes a reckoning. And that reckoning, I suspected, was still to come. The law firm smelled of leather and old wood polish, the kind of place where power whispered through every surface. Michael sat stiff in the waiting area, his hands knotted together, while Isabella flipped through a magazine she wasn't reading. Her parents sat across from them, perfectly composed, as though they'd been here 100 times before. When the receptionist finally ushered them in, the attorney's office was everything Michael expected. Rows of books bound in navy and burgundy, degrees framed behind glass, a desk broad enough to separate truth from the people seeking it. Behind that desk sat a man in his 50s, his gray hair slicked back, his smile measured. His nameplate read Thomas Gaines-esque. "Mr. and Mrs. Flores," Gaines said smoothly, extending a hand. "And Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, please have a seat. I understand you've come to me with a rather unusual property matter." Isabella wasted no time. "It's not unusual, it's manipulative. My father-in-law staged an ambush at our housewarming party. He waved around a deed with his name on it, claiming he bought the house himself. Then he imposed conditions, ridiculous conditions, saying we'd only get full ownership if we created some kind of scholarship fund." She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "We want to know if it's enforceable, and if not, how we can get rid of it." Gaines steepled his fingers, listening. "Do you have a copy of the deed?" Her father slid a folder across the desk. "We secured it before he could pull another stunt. Everything you need is here." Michael shifted uncomfortably. He hated the word stunt. He hated the way his father was reduced to a caricature, a meddler rather than the man who had raised him, sacrificed for him. But he said nothing, not yet. Gaines skimmed the document, his eyes flicking from line to line. He murmured under his breath, then finally leaned back. "Well, it's unusual, certainly, but not invalid." Isabella blinked. "What do you mean?" "The property is legally in his name," Gaines said. "The transfer agreement states clearly that ownership passes to you only under the condition of maintaining this scholarship fund. It's written in enforceable terms. Courts tend to uphold donor intent, especially when it involves charitable conditions." Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Surely there's a way around it. Technicalities, loopholes." "There are always ways to challenge," Gaines admitted. "But you'd be waging a very public battle against your own father. The optics would not be favorable." Isabella's cheeks flushed. "So we're just supposed to live under his thumb, let him dictate our lives because he has money to throw around?" Michael finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried. It wasn't about dictating. It was about her. He gestured toward the photograph on Gaines's desk, two smiling children at a school recital. "He did it for our daughter, for her future." The room fell silent for a moment. Even Gaines looked at him differently, his professional mask slipping just slightly. "Is that true?" he asked. Michael nodded. "He wants a scholarship fund in her name. He wants her to grow up knowing we gave something back, that we didn't just take." Isabella scoffed. "Don't romanticize it. He wants control. He always has." Michael turned to her, and for once his eyes didn't drop under her glare. "No, he's wanted respect. There's a difference." Her parents bristled, ready to intervene, but Gaines raised a hand. "Look, you have two options. You can fight this, drag it through the courts, risk your reputation, and alienate half your family in the process. Or," he tapped the papers, "you can honor it, establish the fund, control it yourselves, shape the narrative, say you're leading a family tradition of philanthropy. In the public, you'll look generous, forward-thinking. No one has to know the origins unless you tell them." Her father frowned. "So you're suggesting we play along?" "I'm suggesting you think strategically," Gaines said. "Sometimes the cleanest victory is not tearing down the wall but painting it your color." Isabella crossed her arms, furious. "I don't want his wall at all." But Michael sat back, the lawyer's words echoing inside him. "Control it yourselves. Shape the narrative." He thought of his father's trembling hands holding the folder, the quiet weight in his voice when he said it wasn't about money but legacy. And he thought of his daughter upstairs, her breath soft as a lullaby. Maybe the old man wasn't trying to trap them. Maybe he was trying to teach them how to build something that lasted. The meeting ended with promises to consider all avenues. Isabella stormed out ahead, her heels striking the marble floor like gavel blows. Her parents followed, already whispering strategies, names of allies, possible PR moves. Michael lingered. He turned back to Gaines. "If it were your father," he asked softly, "what would you do?" Gaines paused. His gaze drifted again to the photograph of his children. "I'd build the fund," he said quietly. "Not because he forced me, because one day my kids would ask what I did with what I was given, and I'd want a better answer than I fought it in court." Michael nodded, throat tight. He left the office with the words lodged in his chest like a secret he couldn't yet speak aloud. That night, Isabella's fury burned like wildfire. She paced their bedroom, railing against manipulation, against humiliation, against me. But Michael lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, hearing only the lawyer's voice, his father's voice, his daughter's future whispering through the dark. And for the first time, he began to wonder if choosing sides wasn't the point at all. Maybe the real choice was what kind of man he wanted to be when his little girl grew up and asked about the foundation beneath her life. Michael waited 3 days before he came. 3 days of Isabella's voice rising in sharp bursts whenever the subject came up, of her parents calling with new strategies, of neighbors stopping him with polite but pointed questions. 3 days of silence between him and me, the kind that sits heavy on the chest and makes every breath feel like confession. When he finally pulled into my driveway, the evening light had dipped low, painting the cracked concrete and sagging gutters in long shadows. I was on the porch, sanding down a piece of wood for a repair project I'd been putting off for months. I didn't look up right away. Sometimes a man has to let another find his own words before he offers any of his. "Dad." His voice was cautious, tired. I raised my head. He stood at the bottom of the steps, hands buried in his pockets, eyes that couldn't quite hold mine. For a second he looked 16 again, about to admit he dented the truck backing out of the garage. I set the sandpaper aside. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust. He lingered by the doorway, as if stepping too far in would mean crossing a line he wasn't sure he was ready for. I poured him a mug anyway, slid it across the kitchen table, the same table that had witnessed every bill paid and every meal missed to keep him afloat. He sat, wrapped his hands around the cup like it was a lifeline. The silence stretched until he finally said, "You blindsided us." I nodded. I did. His brow furrowed like he'd expected denial. "Why?" "Because if I'd told you ahead of time, you would have let them stop you from listening, and I needed you to hear it without their words in your ear." He looked down at the coffee, the steam fogging his glasses. "They say you're controlling me, that the scholarship clause is just another way to tie me to you." "And what do you say?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He traced the rim of the mug with one finger, the way his mother used to when she was thinking hard. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the years settle on my shoulders. "Do you remember when you were 12 and the school was cutting the music program?" His eyes flickered. "Yeah. You begged me for a trumpet, said you couldn't stand the thought of the band breaking up. I didn't have the money, not really. But I worked the night shift at the mill for 3 months straight, and I bought you that trumpet. You played it for 2 years, then left it in the closet when football came along." He flinched. "I didn't know, you weren't supposed to know," I said gently. "That's what being a father is, making sacrifices you'll never see because it's not about recognition. It's about giving you something to stand on. The house is no different. It's a foundation, son, not a leash." He rubbed his face with both hands. "But why the clause? Why the scholarship? Why not just give it to us clean?" "Because I've watched you live in a world where everything is about appearances. Granite countertops, country club memberships, what the neighbors think. And I can't leave you with just walls and a roof. I need to leave you with values. That clause isn't about me controlling you. It's about me making sure she," I pointed toward the photo of his daughter on my mantle, "grows up knowing her family gave back, that she doesn't forget where she comes from." His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "They told me you embarrassed me, that everyone at that party will remember me as the man who couldn't stand on his own." I reached across the table, laid my hand on his. "Michael, do you know what people said to me afterward? They said I reminded them of what family really means. Some even told me they wished they had a father who'd do the same. Embarrassment fades. Legacy doesn't." Tears pooled in his eyes, but he blinked them back, jaw tightening. "Isabella wants to fight it. Her parents too. They've already spoken to a lawyer." I nodded slowly. "I figured. They say it's the only way to protect us." "And what do you say?" He hesitated, then whispered, I think maybe protecting us doesn't always mean fighting you." The words cracked something in me I hadn't realized was brittle. For years, I'd been the silent wallet, the background figure, the man dismissed as unworthy of co-signing. To hear my son admit even a flicker of doubt about their narrative, it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Son, I won't stop you if you fight me. You're a grown man. But ask yourself this. When your daughter is old enough to understand, what story do you want to tell her? That you spent years in court trying to erase your father's sacrifice, or that you honored it and built something even bigger from it?" He sat there, staring at his coffee, the silence between us different now. Not empty, not cutting, just heavy with possibility. Finally he stood. His shoulders were straighter than when he came in, though his eyes still carried the storm. "I don't know what I'll do yet," he said, "but I needed to hear you, not them. You." I nodded. "That's all I wanted." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "Dad." "Yes." He turned, his face caught between boyhood and manhood. "That night at the party, when you pulled out the deed, I was angry, but I was proud too. Embarrassed, but proud." And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I sat back down, staring at the empty chair he'd left. The house was silent again, but for the first time in years it didn't feel lonely. It felt like the beginning of something fragile, uncertain, but alive. In the quiet, I raised my glass of cold coffee toward Maria's picture on the mantel. "We're getting there," I whispered, "one step at a time." The first shot came in the form of a headline. It was a Tuesday morning, still early, when the neighbor slid a folded copy of the Spokane Review under my arm as I fetched the mail. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, his tone careful like a man delivering bad news. The headline on page 3 read, "Local man undermines son's homeownership with manipulative stunt." Below it, an old photograph of me, pulled from the company website I hadn't updated in years, stared back, grainy and unflattering. The article painted a picture I barely recognized: an unstable father, jealous of his son's success, staging a public scene to remind everyone of his importance. It quoted unnamed guests from the party, describing me as erratic, domineering, even cruel. By the time I reached the end, my hands shook with a fury that tasted like metal in my mouth. I didn't need to ask where it came from. Isabella's parents had powerful friends, bankers, editors, business leaders who owed them favors. It was exactly the kind of weapon they knew how to wield, not truth but reputation. And in a city like Spokane, reputation was as good as currency. The phone calls started before noon. Old colleagues confused, distant relatives curious. Some offered support, others asked sharp-edged questions. Did you really embarrass them like that? Why couldn't you just let them have their moment? I let most of the calls go unanswered. Explaining myself felt like shouting into the wind. The narrative had already been written, printed, and delivered to doorsteps across the city. Across town, the Jenkinses were celebrating their victory. Their dining table, the same one where I'd once left receipts to prove my sacrifices, was now covered in newspapers and laptops. Catherine read aloud sections of the article, her lips curling with satisfaction. "This is perfect," she said. "He'll never recover from this. People will see him for what he is, a bitter old man clinging to relevance." Isabella smirked, though the tightness in her eyes betrayed something less certain. "Good. Maybe now he'll finally leave us alone." Michael sat at the edge of the room, silent. The words on the page cut him too, but not the way they cut me. For him, they were knives twisting in both directions, toward his father but also toward his own reflection, because he had been there. He had seen the papers with my name on them, heard the tremor in my voice when I spoke not of control but of legacy. He knew this article wasn't the whole truth. Still, he said nothing. Silence was easier even if it burned. That evening I walked to the corner diner where Maria and I used to have pie on Sundays. The waitress, an old friend, slid me a cup of coffee with more pity in her eyes than cream in the cup. "Rough week, Dennis?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "Something like that." At the booth behind me 2 men whispered. One muttered, "That's him, the guy from the paper." I heard the scrape of a phone camera, the snap of a picture taken without permission. My ears burned, but I didn't turn. I just sipped my coffee and stared out the window, wondering when I had become a story instead of a man. The worst came 2 days later. I was picking up groceries when I ran into Rosa, my sister-in-law, Maria's only sister. She looked at me with wet eyes, clutching her purse like it held her upright. "Dennis," she whispered, "tell me it isn't true." I opened my mouth, but the words caught. How could I explain that the truth had been twisted until even people who knew me couldn't recognize it? That what I'd done for my son was being painted as selfishness instead of sacrifice? Her eyes filled with tears. Maria would have hated to see this, all this ugliness. She turned away before I could answer. That night I sat in the quiet of my living room, the newspaper spread out across the table like evidence at a crime scene. The whiskey glass in my hand trembled. For the first time since Maria died, the house felt not just empty but hostile, like even the walls doubted me. The phone buzzed. Michael's name lit the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Dad," his voice was low, tight. "I saw the paper." "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. So did everyone else. Silence stretched. Then he whispered, "I don't believe it, not all of it, but they're pushing me, hard. They want me to fight you in court." I closed my eyes, let the weight of it settle. "And what do you want?" His breath hitched. "I don't know. I just know I can't lose both sides of my family. But they're not going to stop, Dad. They're going to drag you through the mud until nothing's left." I let the silence sit a moment longer, then said quietly, "Son, a man's name can be tarnished. But character, that lives with you in the dark when no one else is watching. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Not what story you want told about you. What kind of man?" When the call ended, I sat alone, staring at the newspaper headline. My name in bold letters twisted into something it wasn't. For a moment, despair threatened to crush me. But then I remembered Maria's laugh, the way she used to tell me I was stubborn as the day is long. I thought of my granddaughter's eyes, wide and innocent, waiting for a world we had yet to build for her. And I knew, despite the smear, despite the whispers, despite the storm gathering on every front, that I couldn't back down. Not now. Because sometimes the only way to clear your name isn't to hide from the lies, it's to drag the truth into the light where everyone can see it. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I woke with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sting of that newspaper headline still burned, but beneath it something harder had settled: resolve. If they wanted a war of reputation, then fine. I wasn't going to cower behind drawn curtains while my name was dragged through every coffee shop and office in Spokane. I had something they didn't: proof. I brewed a pot of coffee, stronger than usual, and cleared the kitchen table. For years it had been the battlefield of my sacrifices, where checks were written, bills were stacked, balances juggled. Now it would be the place I armed myself for what was coming. I pulled the old filing boxes from the hall closet, the ones Maria used to tease me about. "You keep everything," she'd say, rolling her eyes as I carefully labeled folders and tucked away receipts. She thought it was fussiness, maybe even paranoia. But sitting there now, opening envelopes that still smelled faintly of ink and time, I felt her presence. Maybe she had known. Maybe she had understood. In her way, that one day I'd need to prove my worth, not with words but with paper. The first folder I opened was labeled Down Payment, 2016. Inside, copies of cashier's checks, the equity line I'd drained, the loan officer's signed statement. I spread them across the table like cards in a hand no one could beat. Next came mortgage assistance. 5 years of automatic transfers, $2, $800 a month, every month, bleeding out of my account like clockwork. I pulled out the bank statements, highlighting each transfer with a yellow marker, the lines glowing like scars. $168,000 in total. Then the extras, the water bills I'd covered when they forgot, the property tax checks written from my account, the invoice for the granite countertops Isabella had insisted upon. Each paper slid into place until the table was buried in proof of what I had given. I sat back, staring at the sea of numbers, feeling the ache in my chest loosen just slightly. This wasn't a fantasy. This wasn't a delusion as they wanted others to believe. This was sacrifice in black and white. By noon, the table looked like the evidence board of a detective. Maria's photo watched from the mantel as I added notes in the margins: paid for with retirement fund. Covered when Michael lost his job. Loan officer warned me. Each line was another piece of a story they couldn't erase, but paper alone wouldn't be enough. They had influence, connections, the ability to twist narratives. I needed voices too. I started with Rosa. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Dennis, yeah, I need to ask you something. Do you remember when Michael lost his job in 2019? A pause. Of course, you covered their mortgage. You told me you were eating canned soup so they wouldn't lose the house." Her voice broke slightly and I closed my eyes, breathing in the memory of those lean months. "Would you be willing to say that, on record?" She hesitated, then said, "For Maria, yes. For her granddaughter, yes." By evening I had a list: friends who'd seen me write checks, contractors who remembered me paying for repairs, even a banker who had once warned me I was giving too much. Not everyone agreed to speak, but enough did. Enough to know I wasn't alone. I opened my laptop, created a folder labeled Simply Truth. Into it I scanned every receipt, every statement, every note. The screen filled with digital evidence until the cursor itself seemed to glow with defiance. But as I worked, I couldn't shake the gnawing thought: this wasn't just about evidence. It was about narrative. They had painted me as unstable, manipulative, bitter. If I simply dumped numbers into the world, people might glance and move on. I needed a story. The truth, yes, but told in a way that cut through the noise. That night I wrote until my hand cramped. I drafted my own account, not a rant, not a defense, but a timeline. How I had helped them from the beginning. How every dollar had come with hope, not expectation. How silence had been my choice until they tried to turn my love into humiliation. I wrote about Maria, about our daughter-in-law's disdain, about the moment I decided that sacrifice without boundaries was no longer love, it was slavery. When I finished, the clock read 2:17 a.m. My back ached, my eyes burned, but my chest felt lighter. The next day I called an old friend from church, a man who volunteered with the local paper's community column. I asked him what it would take to have a piece printed. He laughed softly. "A good story, Dennis, something people can't stop reading." "I have that," I said, and I have the receipts to prove it. As I hung up, I felt the first flicker of something dangerous and powerful. Anticipation. Let them whisper. Let them smear. I had been quiet long enough. The truth was coming, and this time it wouldn't be hidden in a folder or buried under shame. It would be printed, spoken, undeniable. And when it landed, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would force every single one of them to face the foundation they had built their lies upon. On Sunday morning, the Spokane Review carried something new, not a smear, not a whisper twisted by Katherine Jenkins's friends at the country club, but my own words, laid out in ink as steady and deliberate as the pen strokes that had once signed away my savings. The community column featured a headline simple enough to draw eyes. A father's gift, a family's debt. Beneath it was my story. Not their version, not their performance at the housewarming party, but the truth told plainly. The 5 years of mortgage payments, the down payment pulled from my retirement, the countless bills covered in silence. The receipts weren't just listed, they were printed alongside the column, line after line, each one a scar made public. I didn't write with anger. That had been my first draft, sharp, bitter, defensive. But I'd torn that one up. The final version was quieter, steadier. I wrote about Maria, about the promises we made when Michael was born, about the sacrifices no father should have to tally but sometimes must. I admitted my mistakes too, that I had given too much without setting boundaries, that silence had allowed resentment to grow unchecked. But I ended with this. A house without values is only walls and windows. My name is on the deed, yes, but the name that matters is the one my granddaughter will inherit. That's why I asked for a scholarship fund in her honor, not as control, as legacy. If that embarrasses anyone, then so be it. I will not be ashamed of sacrifice. By noon, the phone calls had started. Not whispers this time, but voices steady with recognition. Friends I hadn't heard from in years called to say they'd read the piece and remembered the nights they saw me working double shifts, the weekends I missed family barbecues to keep Michael afloat. A contractor left a message saying he still had the invoice I paid when Michael and Isabella remodeled their kitchen. And then came strangers. Emails, letters slipped under my door, messages from people across Spokane, fathers, mothers, even children, who wrote that my words felt like theirs. One man said he hadn't spoken to his daughter in 3 years after she cut him off for not understanding her new life. Another woman said she had drained her savings for her son's startup only to be called a burden when it failed. The tide was shifting. At the Jenkins house, it landed like a bomb. Catherine nearly tore the paper in half as she slammed it down on their marble counter. He made himself a saint, she seethed. Look at this, every dollar listed, every sacrifice paraded for sympathy. Now people will pity him. Her husband paced the room, jaw clenched. Worse than pity, they'll respect him, and once respect enters the picture, it's hard to erase. Isabella read the column in silence, her face pale. She didn't deny the numbers. She couldn't. She'd seen those checks clear. She'd stood in the kitchen holding shopping bags while I covered their utilities. Now the city knew too. Michael stood near the window, the paper in his hands. He read it once, twice, a third time. His throat worked as though each sentence was a stone he had to swallow. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. He told the truth. Isabella turned sharply. He manipulated the truth. He left out how he humiliated us, how he forced us into this scholarship nonsense. People only see what he wants them to see. Michael looked up, his eyes wet. Or maybe they see what's been in front of us all along. The argument that followed shook their walls, but I wasn't there to hear it. I was home, the phone still buzzing with calls, the stack of newspapers spread across my table like evidence of a different kind. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But victories in families like ours are never clean. By Monday, the Jenkinses had launched their counterattack. Catherine called her friends, planted whispers that I had exaggerated, that I had twisted receipts for sympathy. An online post appeared accusing me of financial abuse, painting me as a man who used money to control his son. It spread quickly, social media, forums, even local radio chatter. Spokane wasn't a big city. Stories here traveled like wildfire. Some defended me, others doubted. I read comments calling me both a hero and a narcissist. I knew this wasn't the end. I had struck first blood in public, but they would not let me have the last word. That night, as I sat on the porch with the paper folded neatly beside me, Michael's car pulled into the drive. He got out slowly as though carrying something fragile. In his hand was my column, creased and smudged. "Dad," he said softly, "I read it. I read all of it." I nodded. "And—" He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the porch step beside me. His voice was quiet, but it trembled with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. "I think you're right. About legacy, about values, about everything." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night air smelled of pine and distant rain. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." It was only 2 words, but they landed heavier than any headline, any receipt, any speech I could have given. I put a hand on his shoulder. "This isn't over, son. They're not going to stop." "I know," he said, looking down. "But maybe this time I won't either." And in that moment, under the weight of headlines and whispers, I felt something stronger than defiance rise in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing alone. The invitation came on heavy card stock, embossed with gold lettering. The Jenkins Family Foundation, an evening of legacy and tradition. It wasn't hard to see what they were doing. Catherine and her husband had never so much as donated a box of canned goods to the local pantry, but now they were launching a foundation. More than that, they were inviting half the city's business and social elite and the press to witness it. A stage, a microphone, a spotlight, their chance to reclaim the narrative. Michael called me the night before. His voice was taut, the way a rope feels right before it snaps. "They're planning something big, Dad. They want to bury your story. They'll stand up there and talk about philanthropy, about how they've always supported family and community. They're going to pretend the scholarship idea was theirs all along." I let the silence linger. "Are you going?" I asked finally. He hesitated. "Isabella says I have to. Her parents are expecting us to stand on stage with them, smile for the cameras, play the part." "And what do you say?" For the first time in a long time, his voice broke. "I don't know anymore." The gala was held at the Davenport Grand Hotel, chandeliers blazing above tables set with linen and crystal. I hadn't planned to go. My name wasn't on the guest list, and truth be told, I had no stomach for their theater. But something in my gut told me this wasn't a night to stay home. I found my old suit, pressed the wrinkles as best I could, and slipped in through the back like a man with nothing left to lose. The ballroom buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Waiters floated between tables carrying trays of champagne. At the front, a podium gleamed under bright lights, flanked by banners. "The Jenkins Family Foundation, building tomorrow, today." I stayed near the back, half in shadow, watching. Catherine took the stage first. Her pearls glowed under the lights, her smile wide and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "tonight is about legacy, about family values that transcend generations. Our family has always believed in giving back, in ensuring the future for those who come after us." I nearly choked on the word always. Her husband followed, his voice booming. "That is why tonight we are proud to announce a new scholarship initiative, one that will carry our granddaughter's name, an endowment that reflects the very principles we have lived by: hard work, generosity, tradition." Applause thundered across the ballroom. Cameras flashed. I felt bile rise in my throat. They were stealing not just my sacrifice, but the very heart of it, the idea meant for my granddaughter, twisted now into their stage prop. Then they called Michael and Isabella to join them. Michael's steps were slow, heavy. Isabella's heels clicked sharp against the stage, her smile flawless. She stood beside her parents, one hand on Michael's arm, the other waving to the crowd as though she'd built the house and the fund brick by brick herself. The cameras turned to Michael. For a moment he wore the same smile, practiced and hollow. But then his eyes found mine in the back of the room. I hadn't realized he knew I was there, but he did. Our gazes locked and something passed between us, unspoken, undeniable. He turned back to the microphone. His lips trembled, then he cleared his throat. "I want to say something." The room stilled. Catherine's hand clamped his arm like a vise, but he stepped forward. "This scholarship," he began, his voice wavering, "isn't about tradition. It's not about the Jenkins family's legacy. It's about my father." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face drained of color. Michael continued, louder now, stronger. "My dad paid for this. Every check, every bill, every mortgage payment. For 5 years, he gave everything he had so my family wouldn't lose what we barely deserved to keep. And when he asked us to create a scholarship in his granddaughter's name, it wasn't about control. It was about teaching us what it means to give back, to build something that lasts. The ballroom buzzed like a hive. Cameras whirred. Catherine tried to step forward, but Michael raised his hand. I let people tell me he was manipulative, controlling, embarrassing. I stayed quiet while his name was dragged through the mud. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not when I know the truth. Not when my daughter deserves to grow up proud of the name she carries. He turned, looked at me again. Dad, I'm sorry for all of it. The words hung in the air, raw and heavy. The crowd erupted, some clapping, some whispering, some snapping photos as though they'd witnessed a scandal turned confession. Catherine's smile had collapsed into a grimace, her husband's jaw set like stone. Isabella stood frozen, fury burning in her eyes. I felt my chest ache, but not from anger, from something far more dangerous. Hope. I didn't step forward, didn't steal his moment. This wasn't mine to claim, it was his. But as the applause swelled, I knew the tide had turned again, not because of receipts, not because of articles, but because my son had finally chosen to stand on his own feet, and he had chosen to stand beside me. The Jenkinses had wanted a spectacle. They got one, but not the one they had planned. And in the wreckage of their script, a new story had begun. One not written by their hands, but by a father and son, together at last. By sunrise, Spokane was buzzing like a hornet's nest kicked open. The gala that was supposed to crown the Jenkins family as paragons of tradition had instead become a spectacle of betrayal, confession, and the kind of raw truth people couldn't stop replaying. Clips of Michael at the microphone were everywhere. On local news, his voice trembled over the words, "My dad paid for this. Every check, every bill, every mortgage payment." On social media, the video spread faster than wildfire. Some viewers praised him as brave for standing up to manipulation from his in-laws. Others accused him of humiliating his wife and her family. The Jenkinses moved fast. Catherine gave a statement to a morning talk show, her voice syrupy but brittle underneath. "We love Dennis," she said with a practiced smile. "But he has struggled for years with boundaries. Our goal was simply to protect Michael from an unhealthy dynamic. We only wanted peace." Peace. That word sounded like poison when I heard it on the diner TV as I drank my morning coffee. At the Jenkins household, however, peace was the last thing alive. Michael hadn't slept. He'd come home from the gala with Isabella storming ahead of him, her heels striking the floor like gavel blows. She flung her purse onto the couch and spun on him, her face flushed. "How dare you?" she spat. "In front of everyone. My parents, their friends, the press, you humiliated me. You humiliated all of us." Michael closed the door softly behind him. He was exhausted, but his voice carried something new, steel. "I told the truth." "The truth?" She snapped, her laugh sharp. "You think that was truth? That was weakness. You played right into his hands. You stood up there and proved everything my parents have ever said about him, that he controls you, that he manipulates you, that he can't let go." Michael rubbed his temples, the weight of her fury pressing into his skull. "He doesn't control me, Isabella. He sacrificed for me. There's a difference." She froze as if he'd slapped her. "Sacrificed? You call it sacrifice when he parades receipts like trophies, when he ties strings to every dollar. That isn't sacrifice, Michael, it's leverage. And now you've turned us into a laughingstock." Upstairs, their daughter stirred and began to cry. The sound sliced through the room, a reminder of the only legacy that really mattered. Michael started up the stairs, but Isabella's voice stopped him. "If you keep siding with him," she warned, low and venomous, "you'll lose me." He paused on the first step, his shoulders tense. He didn't turn around. "Maybe I already have." Back at my own house, I sat at the kitchen table, papers and receipts still spread across it like a battlefield map. The phone buzzed nonstop, reporters wanting comments, friends offering support, strangers writing both praise and condemnation. I ignored most of it. My mind wasn't on headlines, it was on Michael. When the doorbell rang mid-afternoon, I half expected him. Instead, Rosa stood there, Maria's sister, holding a pie she hadn't baked in years. Her eyes softened when she saw me. "You were on the news," she said, setting the pie on the counter. "Half the city is talking about you." I chuckled dryly. "Better than being forgotten, I suppose." She touched my arm. "Maria would be proud. You did what most fathers never dare. You drew a line." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they sat heavy in my chest. Pride was one thing, cost was another. and I couldn't stop wondering what price Michael would pay now that the battle had been dragged so far into the light. That evening Michael finally called. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual caution. "Dad, can I come over?" When he arrived, he looked older, his suit wrinkled from the night before, his eyes red from either tears or lack of sleep. He collapsed into the chair across from me, stared at the stack of receipts, then let out a laugh, bitter, tired. "I finally did it," he said. "I stood up, I told the truth, and now my marriage is hanging by a thread." I poured him a glass of water, slid it across the table. "Truth has a cost, but lies do too. You just finally decided which bill to pay." He buried his face in his hands. "She said if I keep siding with you, she'll leave, and I don't know if she means it." I leaned back, watching him, remembering the boy he'd been, the boy who thought love meant never saying no, who bent himself to please everyone around him. "Son, sometimes people mistake sacrifice for servitude. If she can't see the difference, then maybe leaving isn't the worst thing she could do." He looked up, eyes wet. "And what about my daughter?" My throat tightened. "Then you fight for her. You fight the right way, not by hiding, not by enabling, but by showing her what it means to stand for something." The silence between us thickened, heavy but alive. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, bathing the cracked driveway in pale light. For the first time, Michael didn't look like a boy trapped between families. He looked like a man at the start of a long, painful war. A war not just against his in-laws, but against the version of himself they had shaped. And as much as I hated to admit it, I knew the worst was still ahead. The Jenkinses wouldn't forgive, wouldn't forget. They would sharpen their knives, marshal their allies, and strike back harder than ever. But this time, when the storm hit, my son wouldn't face it alone. The summons arrived in a thick white envelope, stamped with the seal of Spokane County. Inside were pages of legal jargon, but the meaning was clear enough. The Jenkinses had pushed Isabella to file suit. The claim that my conditional gift of the house constituted undue influence, financial manipulation, and an attempt to control their family through coercive means. In plainer words, they wanted to strip my clause from the deed, erase the scholarship requirement, and paint me as an old man with too much pride and too little sanity. The court date was set for early spring. By then the story had become too big for whispers. Local news anchors debated it on air. Columnists weighed in. One called me a relic of patriarchal control, another a tragic example of love misunderstood. I tried not to read them, but some comments pierced anyway. Michael, meanwhile, was pulled in every direction. His in-laws demanded he stand with Isabella. Her parents pressed him to testify that I had manipulated him, that he'd never wanted my money, that I'd forced my way into his marriage. But then there was me, his father, who had sat at kitchen tables writing checks with calloused hands, who had spent years covering bills while eating peanut butter for dinner. When the day came, the courthouse steps swarmed with cameras. Reporters shoved microphones at us, snapping pictures as if we were celebrities caught in scandal. Isabella walked ahead in a tailored suit, her parents flanking her like bodyguards. Their faces were carved in stone. Michael trailed behind, pale, his tie askew, sweat at his temples. He looked back once, his eyes catching mine across the crowd. And in that brief flicker I saw it, the war inside him, tearing him in two. Inside, the courtroom was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The judge sat high above, her black robe casting her into a shadow of authority. The Jenkinses' lawyer, a slick man named Harrington, opened the proceedings with a voice that dripped disdain. "Your Honor, this is a case of exploitation," he declared. An elderly man, embittered and unwilling to relinquish control, used financial leverage to insert himself into the lives of his son and daughter-in-law. What he calls generosity, we call manipulation. What he calls legacy, we call coercion. He spread copies of my receipts across the evidence table as though they were weapons. "This is not sacrifice. This is surveillance, financial entrapment designed to humiliate and control." The words echoed through the room. Cameras clicked, pens scratched. My lawyer, a steady man named Peters, rose next. His voice was calm, measured. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself, Mr. Carter did not demand repayment. He did not seek ownership. He asked only for a legacy fund in his granddaughter's name, a fund designed not to enrich him, but to ensure the child would grow up with an understanding of giving. This is not coercion. This is the very definition of love with boundaries." Then came the witnesses. Rosa testified first, her voice trembling but firm. She spoke of the nights she'd seen me go without, the bills I'd covered quietly, the way Maria and I had lived modestly while pouring money into Michael's family. Then a former bank officer took the stand. He recalled the day I refinanced my home. I asked him if he was sure. The officer said, "He told me it's for my son. What else is a father supposed to do?" Each testimony was a stone laid in the foundation of truth. But still, the Jenkinses' lawyer countered, twisting every act of love into a form of control. Finally, they called Michael. He walked to the stand as if carrying the weight of two families on his back. He swore the oath, sat, and for a long moment stared at his hands. "Mr. Carter," Harrington began, his tone sharp, "did you ever ask your father for money?" Michael swallowed. "No," he offered. "And did you feel pressure to accept?" He hesitated. I didn't feel I had a choice." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Harrington pressed on. "So you admit his gifts came with strings, that you were coerced?" Michael's eyes flicked to Isabella, who sat rigid, her gaze burning into him. Then they flicked to me. I didn't move, didn't plead, just met his eyes with the steadiness of a father who had nothing left to hide. Finally, Michael's voice cracked, raw and trembling. "I didn't have a choice because I was drowning. My father didn't coerce me, he saved me, and I was too blind, too proud to admit it." Gasps filled the room. Isabella's face twisted, her parents whispering furiously. Harrington sputtered, trying to redirect, but Michael leaned forward, gripping the microphone. "My dad isn't manipulating me. He's the only reason I still have a house to live in. Every sacrifice he made was quiet, hidden, until you all forced him to prove it. And if you think asking me to build a scholarship for my daughter's future is control, then maybe you don't understand what love actually looks like." His words echoed through the chamber like thunder. The judge raised her hand for silence, her eyes sharp. That will be enough. But it wasn't enough for me. Sitting there, watching my son finally choose truth over silence, I felt something inside me break loose. Years of resentment, of invisibility, of being dismissed as unworthy, all of it gave way to a surge of pride so fierce it nearly knocked me breathless. The proceedings dragged on, lawyers bickering over clauses and precedents. But the turning point had already come. The moment Michael chose not his wife, not his in-laws, not even me, but the truth itself. When court adjourned, the air outside buzzed with reporters. Questions flew like arrows, but Michael didn't speak. He walked straight to me, through the flashing cameras, and said only this: "Dad, whatever happens now, I'm with you." And for the first time in years, I believed him. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and coffee when we returned a month later to hear the decision. Winter had loosened its grip on Spokane, and early spring sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting bars of gold across the wooden benches. People had come in droves, not just family and friends, but strangers who'd followed the story in the papers, neighbors who debated it over morning coffee, even reporters who now treated it like a serial drama. I sat quietly in the front row, Maria's picture folded into my wallet. Michael was beside me, hands folded, jaw tight. Isabella sat on the opposite side, her parents flanking her like generals before battle. Their eyes avoided mine, cold and sharp as broken glass. When the judge entered, the room stilled. Her gavel tapped once. "This matter," she began, her voice steady, "concerns the enforceability of a conditional deed and allegations of undue influence. I have reviewed the documents, the testimony, and the evidence." My heart hammered, Michael's hands clenched. "The court finds," she continued, "that the deed is valid. The conditions for transfer, specifically the establishment of a scholarship fund, are lawful, reasonable, and not coercive. The defendant," she looked toward me, "acted not out of manipulation but out of a consistent history of financial support, corroborated by documentation and testimony. The petition to void the condition is hereby denied." The words landed like stones in a still pond. For a moment, silence held the room. Then it broke, murmurs, gasps, the scribbling of reporters' pens. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My shoulders sagged with a relief that felt almost holy. For once, the truth had not been twisted, not buried, not smothered. It had stood on its own legs. Beside me, Michael whispered, "We won." I shook my head. "No, son, we didn't win, we just didn't lose what mattered." Across the aisle, Isabella's face was pale, her parents' expressions carved from fury and disbelief. Catherine leaned close to her daughter, whispering frantically, but Isabella didn't move. Her eyes were glassy, fixed on the judge's bench as though she couldn't believe the script hadn't gone her way. When court adjourned, Michael rose and faced me. For years, our hugs had been awkward, half-hearted, restrained by distance. But now he pulled me into his arms with the strength of a man who finally understood what love had cost. Voice cracked against my ear. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." I swallowed hard, unable to answer. Sometimes silence says more than words. Outside, the courthouse steps erupted with questions. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. I didn't speak. Michael didn't either. We simply walked past them, side by side, into the sunlight. That evening, we sat at my kitchen table. Not as plaintiff and defendant, not as a father trying to prove himself or a son caught in the middle, but simply as two men bound by blood and bruises. Rosa joined us, bringing a casserole the way Maria once would have. My granddaughter toddled across the living room floor, her laughter spilling like bells, her innocence untouched by the storm we just walked through. Michael raised his glass of water. "To Mom," he said softly. "She'd have wanted us to get here sooner." I nodded, my throat thick. "To your daughter," I added. "May she grow up knowing sacrifice doesn't mean silence, and that love is strongest when it comes with boundaries." We clinked glasses, not in triumph but in something deeper, peace. Weeks passed. The scholarship fund was formally established, my granddaughter's name etched onto the first paperwork. It wasn't grand at first, a modest pool, seeded with what remained of my savings, but it was real. And as word spread, others donated too. Not because of the Jenkinses, not because of the drama, but because they believed in the story of a father who had given, and a son who had finally chosen truth. The Jenkins family's influence waned. Their foundation's gala became a joke in local circles, whispered about at cafes and boardrooms. They still moved in their polished world of pearls and handshakes, but the shine had dulled. Reputation, once cracked, never quite glues back the same. As for Isabella, things grew quiet. She moved out for a time, anger still boiling, but Michael visited often, bringing my granddaughter to the porch where Maria's flowers once bloomed. He didn't have all the answers yet about his marriage, about what came next, but he had chosen a path his daughter could one day respect. And me? I fixed the flickering porch light. I repainted the walls Maria had once complained were too dull. I even planted new roses out front, their buds stretching toward sunlight. Life moved on, not perfectly, not painlessly, but with a steadiness I had long forgotten was possible. One evening, as dusk painted the sky lavender and gold, Michael sat beside me on the porch. His daughter played with chalk on the driveway, her giggles floating in the warm air. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think you gave too much, that it made you weak, but now I see it made you stronger than all of us." I shook my head. "No, son, it just made me a father." And in that moment, with spring stretching its arms across Spokane, I finally let go of the bitterness I'd carried for too long. Because love, I realized, isn't just about sacrifice. It's about knowing where to stop, where to draw the line so that the gift doesn't become a chain. It's about teaching the next generation not just to take, but to give. And in the laughter of my granddaughter, chalk dust on her hands, I heard the promise that maybe, just maybe, we'd gotten it right at last. Dear friends, thank you for staying with me through this story. Stories like these are not just about one family, they belong to all of us. They remind us that sacrifice is powerful, but it must be balanced with wisdom, that love is strongest when paired with boundaries, and that no matter how dark things seem, truth has a way of finding its light. If this story touched you, I'd be grateful if you subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Leave a comment. We'd love to know your thoughts, your own stories, your reflections. Until next time, I wish you health, peace, and happiness in your homes. May your families be filled with love that sacrifices, yes, but also love that teaches. Take care and God bless.